Red Bull just lost a hidden advantage, worth up to 4/10 per lap. A system so powerful, it spread to 7 teams in just a few races. And now, the FIA has officially declared it illegal. This wasn't just an upgrade. This was a loophole that turned hot exhaust gases into pure downforce, giving cars grip they were never supposed to have. And here's the shocking part. That single system may account for nearly 40% of Red Bull's biggest performance jump this season. Now it's gone. Erased. And when you remove something that big, the entire grid resets overnight. So the real question is no longer what flick tail mode was. It's who just lost the most, and who is about to take control because of it. To understand why this decision hits Red Bull so hard, you have to look at what this system really was, because on the surface, it didn't look illegal at all. It looked like innovation. Quiet, subtle, almost invisible. It all begins with something every car has, the exhaust. A component the regulations describe as purely functional. Its job is simple: release hot gases from the engine, nothing more. No performance role. No aerodynamic purpose. Just a necessary outlet. But that's where Ferrari changed the game. Because hidden inside the wording of the rules, there was a gap. The exhaust could act as a structural support. And nowhere did it clearly say that support couldn't be shaped, or used, to influence airflow. That single detail opened the door. And Ferrari walked straight through it. Instead of letting those gases disappear into the air, they redirected them. Carefully. Precisely. Toward the rear of the car, exactly where aerodynamics matter most. The rear wing. The diffuser. And when you send extremely hot gases, moving at incredible speed, into those areas, you change the airflow. You accelerate it. You reduce pressure underneath the car. And suddenly, the car produces more downforce. Not by adding bigger wings. Not by increasing drag. But by using energy that was already there, in a completely new way. And that's what made this so powerful. Because in Formula 1, generating more downforce without increasing drag is one of the hardest things to achieve. And this system was doing exactly that. Quietly. Efficiently. Almost perfectly. The result? Between 4 and 5/10 of a second per lap. That's not a marginal gain. That's the difference between fighting for podiums and dominating races. And the moment that number became clear, everything changed. Because this wasn't something teams could ignore. It spread across the grid faster than almost anything in recent memory. From 1 team to 7 in just a few races. Mercedes, McLaren, Red Bull, all of them building their own versions. All of them chasing the same hidden advantage. And Red Bull didn't just copy it. They optimized it. Integrated it into a larger package. A package that transformed their car almost instantly. Nearly a full second faster compared to earlier races. But here's where the story starts to shift. Because when something spreads that quickly and delivers that much performance, it stops being just innovation. It becomes something bigger. A pressure point. A risk. Because this wasn't just improving the car. It was redefining the limits of the rules. Turning a passive component into an active aerodynamic weapon. And that's exactly where the FIA started to pay attention. Not just to what it was doing, but to what it could become. Because if one team can extract this much performance from the exhaust, what happens when every team pushes it further? More extreme designs. Higher temperatures. More complex materials. More cost. And that leads to something Formula 1 is trying to control above everything else. An uncontrolled development war. But that's not even the biggest issue. Because this system connects directly to another problem the FIA is already struggling with. Energy management. More downforce means more drag. More drag means higher energy demand on the straights. And that means batteries drain faster. Power disappears earlier. The exact issue the sport is trying to fix. So suddenly, this wasn't just a clever idea. It was making a bigger problem worse. And that's when everything changed. Because now, the FIA wasn't just looking at performance. They were looking at consequences. And that's what pushed this from being tolerated to being targeted. But here's where it gets complicated. Because removing it isn't simple. Not when teams have already built around it. Not when performance depends on it. Not when millions have already been invested. And that's why this decision doesn't just create technical tension. It creates a battle. Because the teams that have it want to keep it. And the teams that don't want it gone. And Red Bull is right in the center of that fight. Because for them, this isn't just a system. It's a major part of their current performance. And losing it changes everything. And this is where the situation turns from technical into something much more serious. Because once you remove a system like this, you don't just lose lap time. You break the foundation of the car. For Red Bull, this wasn't an isolated gain. It was integrated into the entire rear-end philosophy. The way the car generates downforce. The way airflow moves toward the diffuser. The way the rear stays planted at high speed. Take that away, and suddenly, everything has to change. Not slightly. Fundamentally. Because now, the rear wing has to do more work. The floor has to compensate. The setup has to be rebalanced. And every one of those changes comes with a cost. More drag. Less efficiency. More tire wear. And most importantly, less stability. And in Formula One, instability doesn't just slow you down. It destroys confidence. Drivers start braking earlier. They hesitate on throttle. They stop pushing the car to its limit. And that's where performance really disappears. Not in the data. On the track. But here's where it becomes even more critical. Because Red Bull's biggest strength has always been balance. A car that feels predictable. Precise. Almost effortless at the limit. And this system was part of that. A hidden layer of stability. A constant stream of downforce that helped keep the rear under control. Remove it, and the car becomes harder to drive. More sensitive. Less forgiving. And that's where the gap starts to open. Because while Red Bull is trying to recover that lost balance, other teams might not need to. Some teams never relied on this system as heavily. Their concepts were built differently. More traditional. Less dependent on this kind of aerodynamic boost. Which means when the ban hits, they don't lose as much. They adapt faster. And that's how the competitive order starts to shift. Quietly, but decisively. But here's the twist that changes everything. Because even if Red Bull loses up to 4/10 from the system, that doesn't automatically mean they fall behind. Because Formula One is never that simple. Red Bull doesn't just react. They evolve. Fast. And this is where their real strength appears. Because when one advantage disappears, they don't try to replace it directly. They find another way. A different solution. A new interpretation. Something no one else has seen yet. And that's exactly what makes this moment so dangerous for the rest of the grid. Because while everyone is focused on what Red Bull is losing, very few are thinking about what they're about to create next. Because history shows one thing very clearly. Every time Red Bull loses something, they come back with something better. More refined. More effective. Harder to detect. And usually, even more controversial. So this ban doesn't just weaken them. It challenges them. And in Formula One, that's when the most dangerous ideas appear. But everything now comes down to timing. Because if Red Bull needs time to recover, even a few races, that window becomes an opportunity. For Ferrari. For McLaren. For Mercedes. A chance to close the gap. A chance to take control. A chance to change the narrative of the season. And that's why this decision feels so explosive. Because it doesn't just remove performance. It creates uncertainty. It opens a door. And in Formula One, the team that walks through that door first usually doesn't give it back. So now, the real question isn't just how much Red Bull loses. It's what happens in the moment they're vulnerable. Because that moment might already decide who wins the next chapter of the season. And this is where everything finally comes together, because the real impact of this ban isn't what Red Bull loses today. It's what everyone else gains, the moment that loss becomes visible. Because in Formula One, dominance doesn't disappear slowly. It cracks. And when it cracks, the entire grid reacts instantly. Right now, Red Bull is facing something they almost never face. Uncertainty. A car that needs to be rebalanced. A concept that suddenly has a gap. A performance model that no longer works the same way. And even if that gap is small on paper, on track, it changes everything. Because when you remove up to 4/10 from a system like this, you don't just lose speed. You lose margin. And margin is what protects you in Formula One. Margin allows you to manage tires, to control races, to defend position without pushing to the absolute limit. Without it, every lap becomes a fight. And that's where rivals come in. Because while Red Bull is adjusting, others are already preparing to attack. Ferrari, the origin of the concept, but also one of the teams most exposed if it disappears completely. McLaren, with one of the most balanced cars, ready to capitalize on any instability. Mercedes, always waiting for the moment the frontrunners lose control. They don't need a full second. They need an opening. And this ban might be exactly that. But here's the part that makes this even more intense. Because this isn't just happening on track. It's happening in development. Because while Red Bull is forced to recover lost performance, other teams can continue building on what they already have. No reset. No redesign. Just progression. And that difference in direction becomes time. And time becomes performance. But here's the twist that defines everything. Because Red Bull is not just any team. They are the fastest when it comes to adaptation. When something changes, they don't hesitate. They don't panic. They respond aggressively, and often unpredictably. So while this ban creates a window of vulnerability, it also creates a moment of innovation. Because Red Bull's biggest strength has never been protecting an advantage. It's creating the next one. And that's what makes this situation so dangerous for everyone else. Because if they solve this quickly, if they replace that lost downforce with something new, something equally effective, then this moment won't weaken them. It will make them even stronger, more refined, more complete. And that's how dominance evolves. Through pressure, through setbacks, through forced reinvention. But everything now comes down to one final moment. That window. The short period where Red Bull is not fully in control. Because in Formula One, those moments don't last long. But when they appear, they decide everything. Championships, momentum, confidence. And right now, that window is opening. So the real answer, the one this entire story has been building toward, is not whether flick tail mode is illegal. It's what happens in the races where it's no longer there. Because if Red Bull loses control, even briefly, someone else will take it. And once that happens, getting it back is never easy.